Hello folks, R1 here. We're going to take a quick look at Rhea. Specifically, we're going to glance at the new hulls again, because the lighting engine has changed and how textures are applied has changed in some cases. But primarily we're going to focus on the new animations in Rhea, now that they're pretty much complete. Now don't panic, first we're going to look at some of the hulls you've seen. There's the familiar Moa that we all know, followed by the Eagle with its new boxy apparatus up top and targeting array on the nose, and the Onyx, which many of you will be happy to know appears to have lost its drone bay. Interesting. And it appears they have finally settled on how they want to implement its color scheme. Now here's something we looked at in the last episode. The Blackbird, the Falcon, and of course, the Rook. The color schemes have stabilized. They appear to have a little bit of work to do here and there, but mostly we're interested this time around in the animations. Last episode I showed you some of the animations, but they were broken. They would deploy and then fail in mid-warp. Well, now we're going to see them functioning in their full glory. As I was undocking, here's a quick glance at a Vindicator hull now, and how the lighting engine is handling it. Keep in mind this is an MR system, so the light is a bit odd. It has that golden glow. He was busy shooting at the wreck of a capital ship outside the station. But let's go ahead and take the Blackbird into warp, and we'll see the animations functioning properly now. There still appears to be a bit of a centering problem with the Blackbird on screen. It tends to appear at the upper quadrant of your screen, which is a little disconcerting, especially when you zoom in. But here goes the animation. The antennas are folding in and the front wings open up. Interestingly, this is the only animation that I can think of off the top of my head where the warp animation actually exposes internal elements of the ship while going into warp, rather than closing up to protect them. People who fixate on the closure aspect of most of CCP's animations scoff and say, why would you want to make the ship more aerodynamic in space? And that's not the point. In most cases, and have the antennas deploy, in most cases, they are simply protecting elements of the ship from debris that might damage the delicate sensor arrays or weapons turrets on the exterior of the hull. This is a problem that we've already run into with our space probes currently in reality, and I believe it was one of the probes sent to investigate Halley's Comet that was nearly taken out by a micrometeorite the size of a pea that it ran into at high velocity. So no, these animations have absolutely nothing to do with making the starship more aerodynamic in space. Many of you who've been watching the Blackbird hull development and its animations will be happy to know that the rear antenna twitch appears to still be intact, and I think it may make it into the final build. I'm kind of fond of that little nervous tick that it has. This hull and its animations have a lot going for it, and I do hope that this is a direction CCP intends to continue in. Now here's something that hasn't gotten a lot of play in EVE Online videos, the Ishkur hull and its variants. The Lance versus the Trident. I come down on the side of the Trident. I rather like the new design, but I am going to miss the Lance. But the thing that most people haven't seen yet are the animations that are included with this particular hull. They're very simple, tasteful, and to the point. Oh, I also, as I exited the station, noticed there was a Legion mixing it up with that Vindicator. And here's a glance at it and how it looks under the new lighting system as well. Now the Tech 3 cruisers are one of the few ships in EVE that have not had major adjustments made for the new lighting system. But still, it does look good. Of course, it always has. Back to the main point, watch the weapon placements on the rear of the ship. The whole section folds in and tucks in tight against the hull as the weapon turrets retract. It looks pretty good, and it seems entirely practical and appropriate for the model. And of course, when it comes out of warp, everything folds back out into place, ready for action. We'll take one more quick look at it from a different angle as we warp back to the station. That's pretty sweet, and it's gotten overshadowed by the other bigger animations that are coming in the next patch, and by the controversy about its lance versus its trident. That's a pity. This is a good-looking model and a great-looking animation. Now, many of you may have already seen the Confessor, the new tactical destroyer that is coming in the next patch. It's a great-looking design. Very sleek, very elegant, and some people have said it looks somewhat Caldera, and I don't follow that at all. That model to me says, I'm a Mar and I'm proud of it. Look at the embossing on the top of the ship. I like that geometric pattern a lot more than the filigree that adorns other Amar ships like the Dragoon. The floral pattern just never really did it for me. But that geometric pattern is kind of high-tech, and at the same time kind of reminds you of something you would see in a cathedral somewhere, and I think it works well for the Amar line. Here's how it's going to look in your hangar bay, but let's take it out into space and put those animations through their paces. Now, I've looked at these animations several times over the last few days, but I held off doing a video in depth on how it looks in its various configurations until I was reasonably sure that they were mostly complete with them. It has 3 different modes that it can go into, of course: a sniper mode, a defensive mode, which is what you see here, and a speed mode. There's a lot going on this ship when it changes modes, so I want to show you these animations from a variety of viewpoints. First, let's take it out to a belt where we have a little bit of room to move and fewer distractions. You'll notice that there is no warp animation. I have manually triggered the ship to go into sniper mode. This is important because you can trigger the animation and the mode that you prefer while in warp. There is no extra mode that you have to worry about. That's kind of important because there's a cooldown timer. You'll see the little timer counting down in the bottom of the screen there. When you change from one mode to another, a timer appears on the other 2 unlit buttons to tell you how long you have before you can switch modes again. I figure it's roughly 10 seconds. That may vary with skills. I really don't know how that's going to figure into the mix yet. So I guess it's a slight negative that you can't change instantly into any mode that you prefer, but 10 seconds really isn't that long to wait. And it's interesting to note that there is no separate warp mode. Now, I'm going into sniper mode here. You'll notice how the armor retracts back from its position while it's in defensive mode, and the 2 sensor booms spread out on the sides of the ship, and the lower bar along the bottom front of the ship lowers down. I'm assuming targeting and sensor apparatus is enclosed there as well. Next, we'll shift it into its speed mode, where it tucks everything in nice and tight, and you'll notice some maneuvering surfaces and maneuvering thrusters at the rear popping out or popping up, as the case may be. We'll look at those a little bit more closely here in just a second. And finally, we'll pop back into defensive mode, where its standard sensor array pops into place and armor plating extends along the more exposed parts of the hull. I'm going to swing around to the rear of the ship because there's a couple of things that I want to show you that are going on back here at the end that aren't immediately apparent. I'm going to get going first just to get a little bit better look at what's going on back here. Right now we're in defensive mode. Engine trails from the 4 main engines. As we pop into sniper mode, everything opens up. Nothing much really changes here. And that's good, and it makes sense. All the animations appear to be on the front of the ship. But as we go into speed mode, you'll notice 2 armored plates retracting from a pair of auxiliary thrusters underneath, and maneuvering thrusters up top pop into a higher position. Now, the auxiliary thrusters down below do not currently have engine trails, and that's functioning as intended right now. Let's go ahead and cover those plates up in defensive mode and tuck everything back in. Apparently they're going to be working on their engine trail system, perhaps to eventually allow those engine trails to be visible when you're in speed mode. But that's going to take a little bit of time and some restructuring of their engine trail system. Let's go ahead and head back to the station. I'm pleased with how they're handling the different modes for this particular destroyer. It's going to open up some interesting possibilities, warping toward a target, and on the fly in mid-warp, snapping out into, say, sniper mode. Hopefully you're coming in at range and can leverage that appropriately. But when you come out of warp, you may find that you're a bit closer than you intended to be to your target, and immediately can shift into speed mode and try and kite your target instead. And if that doesn't work, if you're a little too slow to get away from your target, well then, within 10 seconds, you can make the switch and put yourself into defensive mode and slug it out at close range. These ships will be marvelously flexible, and I've also heard that they may be getting a bonus to CPU use when mounting a probe launcher. We'll see if that actually makes it into the final build. As it stands right now, everything's functional. The bonuses kick in as they're supposed to. Overall, I'm very, very pleased with this new direction CCP is taking with Tech 3 ships. And what I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for, last but certainly not least, the Mighty Bowhead. An ore vessel that is designed to carry up to 3 fully fitted and rigged battleships in its enormous interior. Now, I've seen a lot of people speculating that this ship is not going to see a lot of play in-game, that it's going to be too vulnerable. And I don't think they've thought through all the ramifications of how it can be fit. This ship is going to be very difficult to take down, at least as difficult as a standard freighter is. And probably more so, depending on fit. Now here it is in your hangar. It's truly huge. Again, look at the detail work on the back of this ship. That's outstanding. That whole rear section is primarily devoted to engines, and I'm assuming some engineering as well. Now the question I had was exactly what kind of animations will this hull have? I wasn't sure if it was going to have any, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that they did include some rather unique animations on this vessel. Now, yes, you'll notice that it is at least as slow and unwieldy to fly as a freighter is. Probably a little bit more so. But I think that's okay. It can save you a lot of time moving those fully fit and rigged ships. I personally have an alt or two that flies with red versus blue, and I was constantly moving ships from where I preferred to build them to the actual combat zone, and this is going to come in very, very handy. I think that the general fit configuration for this ship is going to be a simple one. Go for as much tank as you possibly can. Currently, I don't believe you can scan the ships that are carried in this vessel, but I think that that is going to change rather quickly. Watch where I just highlighted with the mouse, the very front of the ship. There are a couple of panels there on the front that are part of the animation when you go into warp. It's not easy to see, so keep your eyes on that front section to either side of that little command section in the very front. Do you see it? It was hard to catch. I'll show it to you again here in just a second, when we come out of warp. Now that's going to take a minute here. This ship is not particularly speedy in warp, which is understandable. Now I know you can take freighters into the new Thera system, but I don't know if this one is just a little bit over the mass limit or not to get one in there, and you'd have to be pretty brave to do so. But if you did, if you warped all the way across system, you'd need to sit back and relax for a while because you're not going to get there anytime soon. Okay, again, keep an eye on that front section as we slowly come to a halt. There we go. And up they go. Nothing fancy, very industrial, very simple. I kind of like that. You'll notice that the belt effects are not in place yet on the test server. The dust clouds, etc., that I'm a little concerned about. I'm kind of worried about how they're going to impact frame rates, but we'll see what happens. We'll give them a good test. I think on the other test server, they've already given that a dry run. We'll see what adjustments they make. Now, the other animation on this ship, I missed it at first. I had to be watching at just the right angle. The whole rear section of the ship is going to slide forward as it goes into warp. Look at the engine thrusters. There it goes, as it slides forward and clicks into place. Apparently needing to be supported a little bit more firmly when going into warp. I have to admit, I kind of like the thruster placement at the rear of this ship as well. All those small engines kind of give the impression that this ship is definitely not concerned so much about speed, but the ability to do fine maneuvers when trying to navigate through areas that probably aren't designed to handle a ship of this size. Areas such as the docking bay on a standard station, let's say. And as we slowly come to a halt, the rear section is going to start moving back out into its normal position here in just a moment. There we go. Again, fairly understated, but I like it. And that's the Bowhead. I'm going to get some use out of this vessel, and I think a lot of you will too. I think they did a great job with what would otherwise have been a rather boring addition to the game. And I think it's worth mentioning that you certainly can't fault their attention to detail in these new models. They are just outstanding, and I haven't noticed any degradation of frame rate at all. We'll see how they hold up when there's a lot of them on screen at the same time. So there's your update on the state of animations as they currently stand in Rhea. I think they're just about complete, and they're looking pretty good. So whether you want to see something sleek and sexy in your hangar bay, like this Confessor, or if you prefer instead the huge bulk of the Mighty Bowhead, Rhea has something for you either way. I'm going to let you folks go for now. And until I see you again, good hunting.